Hey, today we are talking about the Cassiopeia, I hope I say that correctly, from Klanghabitat. Fellow friends of mine from Lübeck, where I come from, so it's an honor to check it out. It's a saturation device for the 500 series and it does wonders on your master bus. So let's give it a try. Up to this point, I have to say that the Cassiopeia is by far the most basic 500 module that I've had in my studio, which is not a bad thing. What is actually the Cassiopeia doing? So there are two vacuum tubes built inside, and these two vacuum tubes are driven out of spec in such a way that they create really nice overtones and saturation. This can start out with a slight, like boost in the highs and the mids, get a little bit more compression, and you can even drive it up to the utmost out of spec saturation like fuzz. And that's what these three parameters give you. So you have the actual saturation knob. So you start out with a rather linear sound, and once you turn the saturation to the right side, you increase the non-linearity, so to say, and it becomes more dirty and more fuzzy. And the intensity in the middle is actually a dry-wet knob. So you have a 0, which means completely the dry signal, and then you increase it to the right, and there's the wet signal, and of course everything in between. And because the saturation can increase or decrease your volume, you can compensate that with the output by minus up to 12 dB. And in the middle, of course, you have the 0. And then there is the bypass switch. So if you have the green LEDs, I hope you can all see that. If you have a green LED, it's bypassed, and then if you put on the switch, the Cassiopeia is active. Sound-wise, the Cassiopeia is a really interesting module. At first, I couldn't hear the differences that much, but the more I started to drive some material through it, I really enjoyed it. It's not your aggressive saturation toolbox. It's really good on dense material, especially on the master bus. I really enjoy the types of saturation and compression curves that I can get out of the Cassiopeia. But again, it's for me something that I would use at the end of a chain. But we get to that. You can also use it as a nice saturation tool for like drums, for example. But generally speaking, I really like it on the master bus. I have this one track that you all should know by now, which I use a lot for those types of demonstrations. And let me put it in at first, the Cassiopeia, and I go through some of the settings. So I increase the intensity, hence fully wet, and the saturation is to the lowest setting, meaning I get the most linear sound out of it. Oh, and by the way, the Cassiopeia gets really hot. I think that's where the warm sound comes from. Haha, no pun intended. Oh, actually, the pun was intended. Let's start out with my classic track. Let's go to the output a little bit. And you can already hear that it's really nice, but let's put it out. Okay, so try to concentrate on the sound. Of course, it gets a little bit louder, try to compensate that. But what's actually happening is it eliminates the harshness of the mix and compresses everything a little bit more together, and you get really nice sheen. I would describe it as that. But let me show you how you would get a more aggressive tone. You know, it really starts to compress easy. Yeah, and you can hear that because of that harshness now, I lose a lot of volume. So I go back and maybe add a little bit of the original signal. Okay, it's a little bit louder. But I hope you can hear what I'm trying to show you here. You get this nice compression. I actually like it more subtle. And then you get this really nice compression. It glues everything a little bit more together. Really cool. I like it for what it is. You know, I like it for what it does to that particular sound in that scenario. And the same is true for a lot of my deep house productions, because you get a little bit of that compression that you want, because sometimes you have this harshness from a digital audio mix. Everything is just like there, right? But to my ear, it gets better once I start to scoop out certain frequencies, but not with a surgical EQ, but rather with a sort of like saturation that allows me to shape or taper off the higher end. I usually do that with tape, and tape is more obvious than the Cassiopeia. So if I go through my Studio, then the Studio will give me a lot more compression and a lot more mid-range and everything more together. That's not what I wanted to bring up here. It's not a debate whether or not tape is better than the Cassiopeia. It's just different tools. So if you would start out with a Cassiopeia, I think that's not the best module. You should already have like a compressor or an EQ, you know, something that you could put in a chain and then start from there. There's also a really nice official plugin from the Cassiopeia, which you can check out from the Klanghabitat website. So check that out beforehand. This is also included when you buy the Cassiopeia, so I think that's great value. I have 2 or 3 more examples where you can actually hear what the Cassiopeia is doing. Alright, that was my review of the Cassiopeia from Klanghabitat. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below.